Excited as I am, are you?
Oh my God, it's welcome to 2024, the year of AI going mainstream.
I know it's taken over the world. I mean, last year we all learned how to spell Chat GPT, and now we're figuring out how to use it in our organizations. We had some great episodes, I thought, last year as we kicked this new series off. And today, of course, where we're going to get into the return on investment for AI projects.
Absolutely. I can't wait to talk about show me the money
I
beyond the hype.
know. But before we get into that, I think it's really important for us to spend just a little bit of time talking about, again, some of the benefits of AI. Why are people so excited about it? And let's bring Reagan Avon up onto here, leader over at Women in Analytics and in Intelligence. There she is. Welcome. Glad that you are here. We were honored. You're a member of this now. This is the third one. You tried to do this from a customer site last time. That didn't quite work out as well. But now you're home, and we're glad you're here.
I have internet. I'll be here the whole time, I promise.
That's awesome.
I'm excited to have this conversation. Hi, everybody. I'm Reagan. I'm a founder and board member of Women in Analytics and co-founder and CEO of Align AI. And this topic is very near and dear to my heart. I have conversations about it all day, every day. So I'm very excited to jump into it.
Fantastic. Well, why don't you jump in right now and start with, if I were going to ask you, and I am going to ask you, what are like a couple of the ways that you see AI making significant impacts in organizations? What would they be?
Yeah, so I've been in the AI space for almost a decade now, helping enterprises adopt AI solutions, and really from both the technical side and the change management side. When you think about the value that a lot of the more traditional AI tools have brought to organizations, I always think about it in two kind of contexts: cost cutting or revenue generating activities. Yeah. And I've seen a lot of really great use cases when we talk about some of the more traditional and simplistic AI implementations, because they are a bit easier to track, a lift from a baseline, or, mass cost savings on marketing initiatives or supply chain use cases. We've seen lots of really great success in leveraging some of those more simplistic implementations. But with generative AI, it's a little bit more complicated, because we're talking about generating words, generating text, and we're getting in more into the nuances of, like, if you understand why something is happening, how do you track and understand all the decisions and the value that the company gets from that? And we can talk about cost savings all day long, productivity gains, but that only gets you so much. And so most of the complex discussion is around value add, better decisions, better outcomes, and how do we attribute that back to these generative AI solutions?
Excellent, excellent. So I did not mention, but you guys are so smart about it. You are all commenting over in the comments, whatever platform you're watching on, introducing yourselves. Please continue to do that. And of course, ask your questions as we progress through this. But we'd love to know who you are, and we'd love to know where you are, because this is a global audience, and it's fun to see how many people are going to show up from Columbus and how many people are going to show up from rest of world. So there is
shout out to Salima. I see you commenting already.
Oh, I love that so much. Hey, Ben, give me one of the top benefits you're seeing of AI today in business.
Well, I think the biggest benefit right now is it is the renaissance of, like, the analytics, right? This whole notion that, oh my God, data can actually do some really cool things in that. So it has created top of mind awareness that has created a focus around investment, because for the last 10 years, there's been a lot of advancements, but I've not seen that it's seen as a strategic thing yet in a big kind of way, because the Chat GPT interface has made this easy to see the impact. And so I think that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, easy to stand on the shoulders of giants, isn't it?
Exactly.
All right. Well, hey, it's not just a three conversation here today. We've got a couple of other amazing guests to join up today. And let's start with Jack Phillips, International Institute for Analytics. Jack, welcome to the program today.
Jeff, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah. Hey, what's the day-to-day? You're new to this program. What's the day-to-day for you as it relates to data, analytics, AI, all that stuff?
I think I'm going to pile on to Reagan and Ben and take it a little further here. We at IA spend a lot of time talking about what we'll call enterprise analytics maturity. And this trend, to echo what Ben said, has really accentuated that, but it's come at it from a tactical perspective. So we're hearing leaders say, the broad workforce is really energized by being part of this obscure thing that we heard a lot about, but all of a sudden accessibility. So you're taking all of that great, analytics capability and you're putting it on my fingertips. So of course we can talk about broad strategic ROI, but we're seeing it worker by worker by worker in terms of retention, excitement about sort of being at the company.
And I think that's one of the things that makes AI so different. We've all been worked in AI for longer than we want to really admit to, and we are in IT. And so we've seen, these different projects come along, and some of them, they're behind the scenes. You never see what happens on the upgrade from X to Y, or a new application comes along and users they trained in, okay, go do this thing. But this really is one of those things that is dealt with at that executive level, at an overarching level, and then also has impact down on an individual's day-to-day work experience.
Yeah. I would agree. My co-founder Tom Davenport used to say, much of this was all sort of Captain Kirk way up in the brig, way up at the top, and now down in the engine room, and everybody's got access to it.
Everyone's got access to it, and boy, doesn't that make it challenging to track return on investment in some cases too, doesn't it? It's a good thing we're going to have a whole conversation on that today. But before we do, let's bring up one more guest, and that, of course, is Neil Bandar. Neil, come on up on stage. We'd love for you to join us, of course, associated with IA as well. But you've got a new job, don't you?
I do. Thank you for the opportunity to join this call. Neil Bandar. I just started with Generac Power Systems. Day 3 for me.
Day 3, and of course, producer Daniel in the background could sure use one of your units right now, as his main domicile is out of power.
Daniel, call me. We can get you set up.
Well, Neil, I'm going to give you a chance to answer the same question, and that is benefits of AI today. How are you seeing it make a difference in the world of business?
Jeff, AI has become so omnipresent. From little things to large, my experience is AI is no longer like a mainframe implementation or an SAP implementation. It's in every little thing we do.
Yeah.
From the point in time I enter a building, I use AI to schedule my elevator. When there's a bank of elevators, and once I get into the elevator, I don't have access to which floor I'm going because I've already made that selection up front. To the point in time where I'm setting up my calendar, looking at my day, it's helping me figure out which ones are prioritized, which ones of my meetings are not. How do I move things around? Scheduling conference rooms, it makes recommendations. It's in the littlest of things that I do. Right, even coming into the office, my GPS system, my car, I get my weather through Alexa. It's everywhere, and it's accessible enough where it's easy for me to interact with it and benefit from it. So the ROI really, to the point made earlier, one, challenging to calculate as a result, but also very easy to deliver on.
That's so true. And I was just looking at the comment from Alok, who talks about been in FinServ for 30 years, various trends, but AI, the key advantage is the ease of use that you can see, and you can see the results so quickly. And isn't that so true about it? But it does require enterprise rigor. We were chatting before we pushed the go live button, weren't we? And we were talking about how even though there's so much hype about it, even though there's so much excitement about moving forward, you still have to do the crawl, walk, run, don't you, Neil?
Indeed. So 2 areas where I see one of the biggest challenges, the way I see it. One is in the area of talent, and the second is in the area of governance.
Okay.
I mean, those are 2 areas that tend to sit on the back burner, not top of mind. But those are areas where, as organizations decide, hey, I'm going to put aside a couple $1 million on an initiative or a couple $100,000 on an initiative, bring in the infrastructure, things that tend to be on the back burner and not get enough attention are those areas. Do you have the right amount of talent, the right kind of talent, the right kind of perspectives to question and look at things? And then these tools have great power comes great responsibility. As Uncle Ben said, is very, very true in the case of AI, and to a much larger extent, all models. Right? I had a conversation recently where someone said, "Why are we putting so much burden of proof on AI?" And the reality is, I don't think that the burden of proof is on AI. AI has just made this top of mind for everyone. The reality is, any model that is going to operate in some sort of an autonomous manner needs that governance to be in place, something that makes sure it's running the right way, using the right data, making decisions with the right social, ethical perspectives in mind, and to extent possible, even taking the future in mind, not just the prevailing requirements, regulations that exist.
Yeah, so true. Reagan, I saw you as Neil started his answer there. You were nodding along. You know, you work as the founder of your own company, helping companies adopt this stuff. You know, we're talking about governance. We're talking about these building blocks of things that still need to happen. Just because it's hot and it's exciting doesn't mean we get to not deal with the basics that have to be dealt with in any IT project.
Yeah, we often start with helping organizations define what ROI can look like. So, what are the costs associated with it? What are the potential upsides? How do we think about calculating revenue gains or cost savings per use case, which is very challenging and very different? It's not a one size fits all. And so on the cost side is governance. If we screw up, we could get fined. We could have, multi-million-dollar fines that we need to address. We could also be wrong, and there are costs to being wrong. And so if we don't put the right guardrails in place, we're screwing ourselves from an ROI perspective, So I think one, it's understanding very deeply what the use case is and how we expect this technology to lift it. In some cases, it's easier than others. And the second is really thinking comprehensively about the costs associated with it, which does very much include governance. It includes a controlled and framework oriented mechanism of figuring out to build versus buy and what parts to build versus buy. And so we often have a lot of those conversations with folks just so they get the parameters and the variables to look at. That's like step number one.
Yeah. Can I just jump in there?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is like I was talking to some folks. Like AI is like a thing. Like like boat owners. The best day, and there's two best days: when you buy it and we sell it. Because AI is like a thing. Like it's really cool, and you can buy it, but unless you actually think through the total cost, you're like, I want out, right? And so you're going to be battling this notion of you've just released something that is really cool. Right. And now people want it. They expect it. Right. But then you have this incredible sort of like operational base of costs and complexity that if you haven't really thought through the operationalization sort of perspective, and Reagan, this is exactly like, the technology and all those kind of things, you can get yourself in a whole bit of hurt in that. That's where like, a lot of the solid foundations around the folks around here can help talk you. Here's like the building blocks. Like it ain't that easy. And so when you think about ROI, it's the same fundamentals that we use to calculate ROI forever with technology. It's just understanding the variables when you look at total cost over time.
Yeah, so let's dig into some of that. But before we do, I really want to call out Sarah, who's joining from a Data Literacy Academy. Super awesome. And she's part of the marketing team. And what I love about this example is simply that AI is that one tool that is impacting literally every department in every organization, or has the opportunity to. All right, so let's jump back into ROI. Let's talk about some of those fundamentals. What are those key contributing or influencing elements that drive or contributing factors in ROI? So, Jack, maybe pop back over to you. What do you see as some of those key elements?
Yeah, I think now, so I think probably estimating expenses on the cost side, sort of the I side of ROI is, I think we can do that. I think analytics leaders now are being forced to almost be, the insurance industry risk managers. So I think there's now this new area of, Reagan, as you said, the likelihood of my costs tripling or quadrupling. Now, all of a sudden, analytics leaders are becoming sort of actuarial scientists almost from the insurance industry. That's a hard one because you've got to reach across to legal counsel, privacy folks, obviously business owners. This becomes, I think, in the old days, candidly, that is pre-Gen AI, there was some of this, but it was a fairly straightforward, I buy things, it makes me able to do things better. I can measure that improvement, that lift, and I can calculate it. Now, leaders that we work with are just really challenged because they're running all over the organization to make sure that everybody's included. Because to Neil's point earlier, everybody wants to be included in this, right? So I'm not know that I'm answering your question directly, Jeff. It's just much more complicated than it used to be.
Isn't that true, Megan? It's so. I wish I could just get everybody to talk at once, but then the listeners would really have a hard time with it. Because it's, as you know, if different people are making their comments, you can see them bouncing, getting excited for an answer. Megan, follow up on that one if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I think the thing I loved about that was the risk side. So things can go wrong. It's, the famous quote, all models are wrong, some are useful, right? Like they will go wrong. And I always have the slide up saying it will be wrong. So how do we understand how it might be wrong and the likelihood of it being wrong? And how do we try to prevent that or put human in the loop to try to catch those things and correct them before they end up happening? So that is a key variable included. And I was nodding my head very violently at that section because I think the cross collaboration across the organization is where a lot of the inefficiencies start to happen. So working with risk, working with legal, working with procurement, getting all of those individuals in the room to have the right conversations about these costs and make sure that you're having a fully comprehensive conversation, getting your CFO in the room, getting them involved. That's kind of where I see this typically fall down, is that people are missing core pieces. And so they're at a much higher risk because they don't have all of the pieces together.
Jeff,
yeah.
If it's okay, I'd love to chime in this on this theme.
You do not need permission. Jump right in.
Thank you, Jeff. Regan, to your point, and Jack, yours as well. I remember back when we used to put business cases for various projects, there was focus on either top line growth or bottom line cost savings, and there were projects that were purely risk centric. Now, as these business cases come up for evaluation, each and every one of them, whether it's a top line growth project, whether it's a bottom line cost savings project, they have to have a risk component, right? And the interesting thing is we've gotten very creative when it comes to thinking about ROI. ROI no longer is in terms of dollars and cents and the reputational risk aspects and stuff. We now bring in our procurement guys, our sourcing guys to think about how do you get indemnified in case this thing breaks, right? Especially in cases where there's plug and play. Instead of the traditional build scenario, you're going to buy something, you plug it into your ecosystem. Are you being protected if one of these things gets breached? Are you protected if a model makes a decision that is unfavorable to a certain demographics or a social segment? So there is a lot of creative thinking that's now going into the idea of an ROI. It's no longer just a financial calculation.
That's so true. And I do think, just to add one quick point onto that, because I've heard it consistently of executive leadership across these large enterprise organizations, they're thinking about it as program management for the initiative that AI enables. So if we're talking about ROI, we're talking about ROI for this big productivity initiative to help people with data analysis with Microsoft Copilot. We're thinking about it in the context of a thing, not AI on its own. So a lot of people who might be just focused on AI in a silo, like how do we quantify ROI of AI in general, is like kind of a silly question to ask. It's more in the context of these bigger business forward objectives and initiatives that are supported by AI.
Yeah, well, that's such an incredible point that you make there, Reagan, because it's exemplifying the fact that these are enterprise-wide initiatives. There's nothing that's happening in a silo. You could say that about most of the IT stuff that's going on these days, but no more so than over here. And that drives the question of, all right, so if we're going to go down this road of engaging in an AI project, how do we build consensus? Because if we are going to go all across across the organization, business unit by business unit. You're going to be knocking on someone's door who hasn't heard from you before because they run a little, business over here or a division over here, the inside of the organization. But AI can have an impact. Let's roundtable really quick around building consensus for these projects. But before we do, there's one other piece we really need to call out, and that is that AI is impacting every aspect of every business and in every geography. I really want to call out. We have a guest here from Ghana, Africa. What an amazing point to have somebody join from there, because this is a technology not just impacting small, medium, and large business, but business all around the world and individuals around the world. All right, so roundtable, building consensus. Neil, over to you.
I think from a building consensus perspective, I feel like AI is like sunshine. It needs to fall on every part of the business. It needs to light everything up. It needs to basically, speaking with some colleagues and friends over the years, the bigger fear is we need more intelligence and less of the artificial side. But I really think you need to the more sunshine falls across all parts of the business, the more wisdom, awareness, and knowledge it'll create.
Ben.
So one, you got to start slow to walk fast, which means don't get too excited. And let's get base. Two, as Neil said, it's like sunshine. You got to get everyone involved, which means you have to start out with, basic 101, right? Create a structured program for basic education. So in a way that people can return, and then think about the use cases, right? Because once you get past the hype, it's like, okay, so tell me what specific thing we can do, and having a framework for talking about what are the use cases, and here's the types. And Jeff, I had sent you a grid that we can throw up there, but having a taxonomy for how you think about use cases and getting people excited about that. So quickly, and everyone take a screenshot right now, because I'm not going to drain the swamp here. This grid says, when you took external and internal stakeholders, who's going to use it, and then how it will be used. There's really 4 categories, right? There's the AI deployed internal, AI for business process, and then AI that starts impacting external stakeholders, which is 3 and 4. And so having a grid, this is a grid to start talking about the solution sets and getting folks excited about how they could use it is a great strategy.
Great asset. All right, so Reagan, how about over to you for building consensus? That, of course, is a big part of how we're going to build business case for AI. So let's start to fade into that as well. We have so much we want to talk about in so little time.
I know. I could just go on and on. I think for this, it's kind of near and dear to my heart, because a lot of our customers, from a cultural perspective, we hear them echo, no one gets left behind. And it's something that's happening over and over and over again. We start every session with no one gets left behind. We make sure we have, office hours for solution rollout to make sure everybody knows how to use this, even with Microsoft Copilot rollouts. And so I think that's been really great from a cultural perspective to see companies actually putting an emphasis on that. I've gotten questions, where do we start? How do we get excitement? And I would say that the parts of the organization that are open to experimentation and learning are the best places to start. Creates a sense of FOMO when people start seeing them use it and get excited about it and see benefits from it. Have a communications plan in place to constantly communicate with everyone in the organization about what's happening, and have an educational strategy in place as well. Not just LinkedIn Learnings and Pluralsights and whatever, those are great. But have something above and beyond that gets people to actually apply these concepts to their day-to-day. And I think those little things added together really starts to get everybody rowing in the right direction, everyone excited, starts to get some consensus about things, and starts to get some order about progress with AI.
Yeah. Jack, your thoughts?
Yeah, we're seeing the highest performing leaders largely have much of this in place already. They've been doing this with BI initiatives and analytics initiatives. This is the lightning rod. So, to actually, that's what you're talking about. So I don't see many of these initiatives as terribly new. I think the only thing I would add is expectation setting. To Ben's point earlier, Many of these business leaders get way out over their skis only to find, oh, I thought it could do this, this, and this, and I can eliminate 30% of my workforce and get the same output. Hold on a second, this isn't the second coming. So that's another thing I would add.
Well, and while you've got the mic, Jack, let's start to talk a little bit about how we measure ROI. Once we get some expectations in place, we correctly assess them, we build consensus, we start to do all the work that needs to be done. How are we going to measure this over time?
Yeah. So again, leading analytics, leaders and high performing organizations have figured out what we call the targets of the Delta model, way back to Tom Davenport's original work. And they've figured out a methodology that business stakeholders agree with. To us, the big piece is you have to get those business leaders to agree with your methodology so that at the end of a project, that leader doesn't say, oh, sure, it was the AI and the analytics that had a role, but boy, our sales team really came through that, so it's this credit point. So I feel like a little bit this is deja vu. In the last 20, 25 years, leaders of analytics have fought this. But to us, the biggest aha is when you get to the finish line and say, look at all the greatness we created. You actually have to kind of sharpen your elbows and say, let's take our own amount of credit for that.
Yeah, Reagan, nodding your head.
Yeah, for sure. I think the other component to calculating ROI is the shared service. So you hear it often with data sets. The more use cases we can leverage with the data set, the more value we get from that one data set. So it's a many to one kind of calculation. And so when we think about ROI, in the beginning, it might seem like not a lot of return for a lot of investment. But over time, as you start to reuse data sets, reuse some of the infrastructure that you've built, and look at some of the variable versus fixed costs associated with that, it starts to get more and more compounding in value. And so it's hard to get to that critical point because that assumes that you've got momentum, that assumes that you have scalable process. But there is a tipping point that I see a lot of organizations get to where it's not these bespoke initiatives anymore. They're actually kind of running with it.
Yeah, Neil, your thoughts?
Yeah, Jeff. So to build on what Regan and Jack said, the idea of calculating ROI is improving on your existing assets. I mean, with connecting more dots in terms of data, I feel like we used to end up buying a bunch of different data sets for one-off purposes. Now you can use those in your training data for AI to have a much long-term return on that investment. So your ROI is no longer limited to just the implementation of the software, but all that pre-investment you've done on the data side, both on the cleanup, on the prep, and even those data sets that you're buying that were for one-off purposes. Now, one thing that I do want to ensure it doesn't come off as a very simplistic answer on the ROI calculation, which is you've got to have a very broad perspective and a predefined thought on what policies exist on how the data is to be used.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
All these social contracts, consents, disclosures that we capture when this data comes through, but oftentimes those tend to get overlooked, or there are people that and organizations that I've known of that are gun shy of bringing things beyond the bare minimum. Now, as true as it is for an AI model, the more value you're going to get is in connecting as many dots as possible.
Yeah. Neil, it's almost if we're going back to the beginning of the conversation, and it's as an IT project that needs to be dealt with in a mature way. Indeed. And not just thrown against the wall and hope that it works well.
Absolutely. I do wish to make one last point, Jeff, which is basically to what Ben was saying earlier, which is, the happiest day for a boat owner is the day you buy it and the day you sell it. AI tends to take that sort of a form sometimes, where the FOMO causes a lot of excitement at start. Everyone wants to jump in, but then if you don't have a sustainable model to continue to train people, give them the flexibility to think and ask those creative questions, empower them to think in ways outside of their box, you're going to be severely limiting the ROI of a capability like AI.
Yeah.
Like AI is not just a pigeonhole.
Yeah. Jeff, if I could just jump in real quick, just one point. I spent the early part of my career as an industrial engineering in like calculating ROI on projects for everything, right? What I realized is that that is in the known world, right? When you think about where AI leads us into new customer experiences, new things, that's the unknown. So I think that's where it gets really hard.
Yes.
Is traditional methods for accounting for ROI that don't contemplate, what is your market risk for not doing something, right? What is in thinking about things from a innovation platform in versus a sort of like maximizing the asset base you have, right? So it's playing not to lose, which is a cost optimization, versus playing to win, which is like let's swing, right? And so I think the first part of this is kind of, and you don't know until you do it. And as I said earlier, you're not going to learn how to drive in a parked car. So for those kind of organizations, like, you got to do something if you want to talk about it.
Jeff, I want to chime in on what Ben just said. So one of the things that I've been working on separately offline is the idea of reducing the cost of curiosity. Right. So when you think about that as a concept, what you have to start to realize is, in order for you to truly reduce the cost of curiosity, every incremental question you keep asking and asking and asking needs to cost less than your previous question. Right? When I buy an Alexa device, I am no longer paying for that device every question I ask.
Yeah.
It's fixed cost for me at that point, other than the cost of the internet, cost of power, which is minuscule compared to everything else I do. So your ROI calculation has to have those sorts of perspectives when you approach AI.
Yeah, that's so good. And I did have to mute so I could type without being heard. Reduce the cost of curiosity. I think that's going to get printed above my desk here and becomes the new mantra for 2024 for me. All right, we are a little bit over time, but I don't want to stop yet. So here's what we're going to do. First of all, a huge thanks to all the folks who have been commenting as we've gone along. I wish we could have addressed all of them. I'm glad that Daniel has brought them up onto the screen. Sarah, Sadul, I mean, some great comments in there and great wisdom. So hopefully everybody's able to see those down in the thread. So here's how we're going to end this. And it's going to be, if you could encourage folks to do one thing around ROI. Maybe it's how they get started. Maybe it's continuing. Maybe it's how they think about it. Now's your chance to encourage the world, because literally from Ghana to South Africa to San Antonio and Columbus and all points in between, we have people listening. So let's start with Reagan.
Yeah, I would say I'm going to steal a quote from my dear friend Kathleen Maley, and she tells everyone that she works with, even internal stakeholders, that if you're going to do AI, you have to be willing to change. And I think there's a cost associated with that change, and so that might be one of the biggest shifts in perspective. That might be a little bit different. Is just, you have to be willing to change, and you have to be willing to deal with ambiguity. And so there's a piece of it, like I've heard lots of financial organizations that are like, I need to see how this hits the P&L. And in some cases it will, and in some cases it will not. And so I think having a more innovative mindset, like Ben said, and also having a perspective of being willing to change is super important.
That is so good. That is so good. All right, Jack, how about you?
I would say, remember that this profession is not new. AI may seem new, but this profession is not new. Borrow from others who have, sharpened their pencil on a return on an investment calculation. So remember that this is stand on the shoulders of others, maybe, is my advice.
That's a good one. Neil, over to you.
Yeah, I'm going to combine what Reagan said. Reminded of Edward Deming's, it's not necessary to change. Survival is not guaranteed. It's not mandatory.
That's powerful. Good. I love it. Ben.
I don't know how I follow all those brilliant. Other than the notion of like, maybe, so when people are talking about what's the cost, the ROI in doing it, they should think about what's the cost if I don't do anything. Right?
The opportunity cost.
What is the opportunity cost that I'm blowing?
Yep. Right. What happens to all your competitors when you
just ask Nokia, who used to be like the biggest sort of like cell phone? They did all the right things. but they missed some cues.
They did. I think they invested a little too much R&D into the quality of their buttons on their phones. Maybe that was it. Maybe we didn't need buttons after all. Well, everyone, I hope that you've enjoyed this. We're coming back with more of these. We'll be slicing this content up and making it available on all the channels in LinkedIn and YouTube's and with all these organizations as well. And I also want to encourage you, if you want to learn more about any of this sort of stuff, our course great benefactor, Rackspace Technology, we have a program called FAIR, which is the Foundry for AI. Here at Rackspace, but here are all of the QR codes for you to learn more. So I'd encourage you to go check out FAIR if you want to learn if your organization is ready to start adopting. There's a great quiz that'll help talk about your organization's propensity for being able to adopt AI over on that FAIR website, fair.rackspace.com. Of course, Women in Analytics, you can head over to the Institute for, International Institute, they're quite broad, for analytics, and then of course CDO Magazine, all taking part in this event here today. Everyone, thank you so much for being a part of it. Panelists, you guys are fantastic. I'm going to go back and rewatch this and write down all the smart things you said. And the curiosity comment goes up on the wall by end of day today. All right, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And thank you for spending the beginning of it, or wherever you are in the world, with us. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you on the next episode of AI and You.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.